So I think we're just going to go ahead and get started. So good afternoon or good morning or evening, depending on where it is you're joining us from. And welcome to our webinar where we plan on introducing our new solution, which is the AI scan, which is firmly part of a new era of smarter supply chain monitoring. I'm Chris Higgins, and joining us as well is James Flynn from Primority. We'll get on to introductions in just a moment, but I'll just quickly run us through the agenda for the webinar. I'm going to need James, my glamorous assistant here, to change the page for us. Perfect. So the agenda, as you can see on screen, we're running through some brief introductions. James is then going to kindly take us through an overview of AI scan and talk a little bit about the thought process that went behind it. He's then going to take us through a demo of the actual tool itself. I'll then host a Q&A session where I'll hopefully get you all some answers and further information on anything that comes to mind throughout the webinar. I think in order to do that, I've seen quite a few of you already using the chat function, which is great. So what we're going to ask to do is use the chat function within Zoom. So for anyone unfamiliar with that, if you just go down to the bottom of the page, there's a little icon there that says chat. Click on that, that'll pop up a little chat box and you can send messages in there. So when you do that, if you do want to send a question specific to myself, that's fine. Or if you want to send it to everyone, that's great as well. What I'll do is once James starts running through the presentation, I'll pop a little message in there just so you can see my name. And from there, you can click on and send me a message if you wish to do so. Later on, we'll through the Q&A, we'll hopefully get you some answers on some of those questions that go in there as well. We'll round it all off by talking about our introductory offer for anyone attending the webinar today. And so that kind of will round us off nicely. So without further ado, who am I? I'm Chris Higgins. I'm the Customer Solutions Manager. And I've been with Primority for a little over a month now. Some of you on the webinar will have already heard from me. But I'm fairly new to the industry, so I'm excited, as I'm sure all of you are, about AI scan and the benefits that it's going to bring. My core responsibilities are to work with new and existing customers to ensure they're getting the best out of 3R Verify now, and also moving forward as the businesses and the industry changes. That kind of summarizes up what I'm doing. I'll pass you over to James, who can introduce himself and then get us moving.
Thank you very much for that, Chris, and welcome everyone to this webinar. People are still arriving, so every now and again I'm having to admit people into the room. So yeah, do say hi in the chat box. We've got 36 people here already. I'm expecting that one or two more might try and get entry. So depending on how mid-flow I am, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, my name is James Flynn. I'm the CTO and founder of Primority. For you, those of you who do not know who Primority is, we are a UK-based food safety and quality management systems provider. We operate in the UK and in the US, and we help food businesses digitize their compliance processes in a nutshell. But I want to talk today about one specific aspect of all of that, and that is what I think is a bit of a blind spot in many food companies, kind of rear view mirror, so to speak. So AI scan is about using artificial intelligence to scan the data about food supply chains and learn from that and share that learning with our customers and ultimately with other people as well, as I'll talk about a bit later on. But the first question we have is, we talk about risk every single day, risk management, hazard analysis, and all these kind of things, and very few people actually talk about what it is, what it means. So we thought we'd start with the definition of risk as defined by the International Standard on Risk Management, ISO 31000. So as you can see on the screen, it's the effect of uncertainty on business objectives. This effect can be both positive or negative. And in terms of the food industry, the business objectives are quite clear: legal, safe, high quality, authentic food, and a profitable business and a growing business. And if we're not achieving these things, then it's going to be difficult to keep any kind of food business going. So in a food safety context, uncertainty, aka risk, is usually focused on food safety hazards or threats. And quite a lot of these hazards and threats can be unseen until they affect a particular business. So in the context of AI scan and what we're trying to achieve, the particular supplier risk events that we decided to include in our system were food safety alerts, allergen alerts, certification expiries, import refusals, regulatory issues, and negative news about our suppliers. Now, why do we pick these things? Well, the first 5 of these, they all come from trusted data sources. So whenever we're going to use data, it has to come from somewhere that we know is doing a good job in terms of gathering that data and then sharing that information. However, the job of actually gathering the data from these different sources and understanding what they're saying is complex, because it's all different locations, different data formats, and so on. And that's why we have applied artificial intelligence to this problem. And I think we've been pretty successful in that, as I hope you're about to see. So the key thing is that all of this data is gathered, and we need a consistent way of analyzing that information, and also in terms of risk, having a risk model that fits for all of our customers throughout the world. So these are some of the sources that we are using. I think everybody pretty much would agree that the FDA is a fairly big trusted source of information on compliance, as is the Food Standards Agency in the UK, Food Safety Authority of Ireland, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and Australia and New Zealand Food Standards. And they're not the only ones that we will be using, but we had to start somewhere with this. So we went for good, coherent data sources in the English-speaking language, frankly, that had high quality information, as well as some volume that we could use to apply artificial intelligence machine learning to. So these are some of the data sources. Now, why did we pick those ones? Well, and why do we pick food safety alerts? Well, real food safety alerts tell us about real risks in the supply chain. And amongst all of that data, there are going to be things that are going on that are relevant to us, and some that are many things that are not relevant to us. So being able to filter through the noise is going to be important. So I want to talk a wee bit more about how we go about identifying what a risk event is and why we chose these particular risk events. So at this moment in time, we're focusing on 6 main, what we call risk events. So clearly, if your supplier in your supply chain has a food safety recall, then that's a risk event. You need to know whether it affects you, but it's still a risk event. It's still something that's happening that's causing some concern, therefore there's a recall. Same kind of thing for allergen alerts and allergen recalls. If a supplier in your supply chain loses their certification, be it BRCGS or SQF or IFS, whatever it is, that is obviously a cause for concern, because we're relying on that certification to do a lot of our due diligence. If one of your suppliers has an import refusal in another country, for example, in the US, and they're exporting to the US and they get picked up for some sort of label problem or an undeclared allergen, or because they sampled and they found salmonella or E. coli, then of course that could be a problem too. And then we have the 2 bottom ones are not so much about, well, they are about external data sources. Sorry, negative news is about an external data source, but that's really about lots of different things that are being said about your suppliers. So we've done a bit of work on that, and we haven't quite finished that yet, but that's looking very promising. So that's effectively our system listening to the internet at large and determining whether you need to know about something that has been mentioned about one of your suppliers. And corrective actions. So corrective actions obviously are what you do when you find that there's something wrong with one of your suppliers, and therefore that's internal information that you would raise and manage, etc. So it's kind of an internal measure. So these 6 things we believe have a lot of useful information that can be used to measure and monitor risk in your supply chain. The risk model components, therefore, that we're going to use to measure things are these 4 items. Let me tell you a little bit about that. And this will all make sense when we look at the solution in a short while. So the first thing is that something goes wrong in your supply chain. that may or may not have an impact on your business, and only you can do that. No amount of artificial intelligence can make that judgment call at this point anyway, as to whether this particular event is having an impact on you. I think in the future, we will be able to automate that part as well. However, it's still a good idea that when AI Scan tells you something, that you should go look at it, you should assess its impact, and that in conjunction with your configurable risk model will then assess the risk score. So impact is really the starting point of and the main point of how you are getting involved with managing and measuring the risk. The second point on the top right here is the risk event score. And the way that we are doing that at the moment is we are saying for each type of risk event, like a food recall or an import refusal or a regulatory compliance issue or whatever, what we're doing is we're saying, well, let's count those over a 5-year period, because someone who's got a lot of a particular risk event and over a 5-year period clearly has issues, and someone who's got less has less issues, and therefore the risk is going to be different. So if you take that along with the impact, then we can start to understand something. The third part is that not all risk events are important to everyone. So we look at the different types of risk event. Some may be absolutely critical, like food safety, for example, whereas import refusals may not be because they have a different regulatory environment and we're not really interested. So we want to be able to put a different weighting on different types of risk event. And then the fourth part of our model is forgiveness factor. Clearly something which happened last week is much more important than something that happened 10 years ago. And we're going to look at some examples of these things. So let's go through to some principles that come from that. So 3 really key principles. First, that risk events have different impact levels depending on how they affect your company. Therefore, they need to be assessed individually. Some risk events are more important than others, so we apply more weight. The third part is that older risk events are quite often less important than a risk event from yesterday, so we can apply some kind of forgiveness or discount, whatever you want to call it. These are 3 sort of key principles that we've applied at this point. Let's look at some underlying examples of how we really come up with this idea. So in China, everyone remembers, I hope anyway, the melamine scandal with the substitution of melamine into infant milk powder, which also found its way into American pet food, which is how it was detected. So that particular incident had a high impact. It was global. The weighting was high because it was a food safety issue. Yet babies were dying in China, pets and cats and dogs were dying in America. It was killing people and animals. Forgiveness, however, if you measure it today, would be fairly high because it's happened 12 years ago. We've never seen anything like that of that magnitude since, and therefore today the risk score is low. Of course, in 2008, the risk score would be very high. South Africa, Listeria 2017, high impact. 250 people died from this Listeria outbreak because they failed to detect the source for a long time. Very high, it was a high impact. The weighting, very high, a lot of people died. Forgiveness score would be low because it was only 3 years ago, and therefore the risk score would be high. So I think you get the idea. Ultimately, the risk with our suppliers has to be measured on the same sorts of metrics from that point of view. And this is a starting point for what we're doing. So key things that we need to think about in plain language: how big are the consequences of each individual risk event? How many times has that happened? What weight should we apply? And what forgiveness factor should be applied based on the age of the risk event. And these 4 factors determine the risk event score, and you, in AI Scan, you can configure this to be what you need it to be. So just a quick one for you, those of you who don't know us, this is the problem we focus on. This is the way information goes around the food supply chain and internally within food companies, different departments, different systems, silos of information, and breakdowns in these communication and out-of-date information causes a lot of problems, including product recall and food poisoning, food outbreaks, and so on. What we try and do is connect everyone to one common platform so that communication can be based on the latest approved information and so on. And we try and take an integrated approach. So we've got a full system that looks at all of these different areas of food safety and quality management. And of course, today we're going to be focusing on the risk management of suppliers out of that set of things. So this is 3i Verify. I'm not going to go into all of the other areas other than to say it's a fully comprehensive food safety and quality management system. And the part that we're interested in today is this one here, AI Scan. So we have a supplier module in the system, and all of the suppliers in the system are automatically going to be in AI Scan. So I'm just going to go to AI Scan and show you what that means. Okay, so the screen's loading up here, and what we're seeing here is a list of all of the different sites in the system. So this, if you're a food company that's got 4 or 5 factories, 10 factories, whatever, this would be a list of your factories. Each of these factories, or if you're an importer, each of these importers has a list of suppliers. And that's what we're seeing in the list here. So these are all of the suppliers that are actually in the system and being monitored within AI Scan. So the way this actually works is that you add a supplier into the system, and we then take that supplier and then go look for information on them in our AI Scan database, which has already collected a ton of information from the food supply chain, and it's analyzed it already. So as soon as we add a supplier, then it's going to automatically risk assess it right away. So I've got a couple of examples just to show you this in practice. So I had a look earlier today at some food alerts in here, on various different sources. I'm just going to add a new supplier, and what this is going to do is it's going to look in our global database for a company called Starkey Water, right? So they obviously bottle water and so on. And they're in the USA, and it's found their details already because we've picked this up from an alert. We've then identified the company and pulled in their address details and all that kind of stuff. And we've done a lot of analysis already on the details of whatever they're going through. So we've selected that company and we go save. And now that's going to add them in, and it's going to pull their data from the AI Scan database, and we'll immediately be able to see what is going on with that supplier. So you can see why I used this example. They've got 2 food safety alerts. The risk score was calculated on the fly as we added that particular supplier according to the risk model that we've got in the system. I'll show you how that works in a bit. But you can see already they've got 2 safety alerts, nothing for allergens. They don't have any, we can't find any expired certification records, no import refusals, no regulatory issues, no negative news, and because they're a new supplier, we don't have any corrective actions raised against them. So they've got a medium score there of 27. But we might be curious about this, and therefore we want to drill into that. So over here, we've got the Supplier Profile button. You click into that, and then we can start learning a bit more about this particular supplier. So scrolling down, you can see the risk information's all come through here. No certifications found. If we had contacts, we'd be able to show them here as well. And this data is from the last 5 years. So what we're looking at is data from previous 5 years. And in here, we can see there are 2 safety alerts. One of them is 12 parts per billion of arsenic detected in water sample, and that was on the 4th of January 2017. And this one, glass bottles are recalled because of arsenic in 2016. So pretty close, within a month or so of each other. They obviously had an ongoing problem there. So the first thing we'd want to do is we'd want to go and check that alert. So we click on that and it takes us through to the actual FDA report on this thing. And in there, we scroll down and we can see all of the details about that. And then we can verify that this is a real event. And we can check the address and all these kind of things. And so for us, if these guys were a supplier to us, we would immediately want to do the impact assessment and say, very high impact, need to consider product recall, for example. Okay, so we just do this. And again, that will refresh all of that. And in the safety alerts, you can now see that's color coded and that will affect our overall risk score the next time the risk score gets calculated. But in the meantime, what we'd want to do now is we would want to raise a corrective action. So in the system, we're going to look product recall assessment. And over here, we are going to pick product recall. Just for speed, I'm just going to copy this and paste it in here. So we have the details in here. It's going to be linked automatically to this particular record. And I'm just going to assign it to myself. But if you'd assigned this to someone else in the team, they would get an email about that, and they would immediately go ahead and know what to do in terms of what's happening next. And we need this actioned today. So right away, we're able to raise a corrective action, link it to that particular supplier event. We've changed the impact so that when the risk calculation is being updated, we're going to see them in there. Now, because I had just added that, it went to the bottom of the list, so I'll just bring that back up. So you can see Starkey Water there, and then now we've got the corrective action in here, and that will be progressed as time goes on, and that will also show in the supplier profile, so that we've got a complete record of everything to do with that particular supplier. So there is the product recall. Okay, so all well and good. We've got this supplier profile. Let's take a look at a couple of other examples. So I've kind of taken you through a whole sort of example there. I'm going to pick a UK one now that I checked out earlier. Again, this is a fairly recent one. I'm not picking on anyone for any particular reason other than they've appeared recently in some kind of food alert. And you'll see I've got a couple here. Rude Health Food, so there looks like there's a bit of a duplicate there because it's been described twice, probably in 2 different alerts. I'm just going to pick that one. You can confirm the address and then save that one. And again, that will add that into the top, and on the fly, it will automatically calculate the risk score according to your risk model. So we're going to go and look at that in a second. So these guys have had 2 issues, one safety, one allergen, and we can go look at the profile and dig down into that. And there we go, there's the one safety one. So this was a salmonella issue in August of 2020, so very recent. And here's an allergen issue in 2018. So these guys have had some issues. So we click through to that, and it'll take us to the Food Standards Agency in this particular example. And you can get all the details, including in here. I'm sure there'll be batch numbers and stuff somewhere in there, and we'll be able to find that out. Now, different agencies take different approaches. Food Standards Agency tends to be a little more, well, it tends to be very focused on consumer in terms of messaging, whereas FDA and so on and others, FDA in particular are focused on consumer, but they identify suppliers much better than anyone else does, including names and addresses. So FDA are definitely a very, very rich source of data from that point of view. Okay, but I think you get the idea. A couple of other advantages in here. I'll show you before I take you into the risk model side of things. You can order and score all of these, so you can see who your highest risk suppliers are there. This one's got an error in the calculation for some reason there, but you get the idea here. You can order by risk. You can order by the number of safety events and so on there, number of allergen events, import refusals. So these guys here have had 4 import refusals. I've not seen one of them. Let's have a look at that. So 4 import refusals. We go down here and you can see labeling. It's a very common one for labeling, for example, misbranding and so on. And these all come from the FDA in that particular instance. This can also be printed and downloaded as a PDF, but I won't bother with that right now. It gives you a document which you can then share with whoever you need to share it with internally or with customers or whatever. So I'd like to focus a little bit more in on the risk model, because this is going to be very important. It's no good having a risk management system that you don't know how it works. So let's go into the, I need to drag this out of the way. Let's go into the AI scan admin. So you need to have special admin privileges, of course, to get into the admin area. You'll notice there's 3 options in here: risk model settings, news keywords, which is where you would enter any keywords you want to monitor suppliers for, and news subscriptions. So this is a separate subscription service, which you would decide how much you want to spend on that and that kind of thing, because it costs us money. We have to go out to Google and pay for these searches and so on. So let's dig into the risk model settings and get an idea of what we're looking at. So the first thing you'll see is these are the 4 criteria we spoke about earlier: impact, risk event score, risk weighting, and forgiveness factor. So firstly, on impact. So you can edit these. So if you don't like the word very low, no consequences, you can change that to what you want, but you must have 5 of them, right? And you can edit the score associated with each of these. So when you set the impact, as you would do here, right here, when you set the impact, what you're doing is you're picking 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 as the score that gets fed into the risk calculation for that event, okay? So what happens when you have an event that's come in, but you haven't scored it yet? Well, it gets a default score of 4 in this case. And again, you can pick what default score you want events to have when something first comes in, but no one's looked at it yet. So the next point then is, for each of the different risk events that we're monitoring at the moment, safety alert, allergen, and so on, we have a risk range score that's measured over 5 years. So if someone's had, like say 1 food safety alert in the last 5 years, then they're going to be risk range score 1. If they've had 4, they're going to be risk range score 2. If they've had been between 11 and 100, they're going to be risk range score 5. And so these are the numbers which are going to be fed into the calculation. And that is set for each different type of risk event, okay? We then have weighting. So each of the risk events, safety, allergen, refusal, and so on, you can decide what kind of weighting you want to apply to that. So you might say, well, I'm not interested in news alerts, so I'm going to set it to 0, or I might want to set it to 5, or whatever. Okay, same for corrective actions and so on. And then, and of course, you just save these things down here. And then we have forgiveness factor. So anything that happened in the last 12 months, we're going to say, I don't want to forgive any of that. If it happened 1 to 2 years ago, I might say 20% forgiveness, 54 there, 70, and then 90. So using this approach, of course, you need to validate this for yourself, but using this approach, this allows you to configure the risk model in order to get the benchmark risk score out of the system that suits your operation. So it should be taking care of your preferences in that regard. These numbers here are the unweighted 5-year risk score. So notice that it's 5 years from by default in the search bar at the top. So these numbers are the unweighted number, and this is the 5-year weighted risk score across all of the risk events and so on. So if you wanted to go back further, you could do that by going back to, I think 2012 was about the earliest we've got data for. So we'll just go for that. And that would bring everything from that particular date range. So it's bringing everything from that date range, and then you can drill into that and see everything for that date range for that particular supplier. So you can go back further, but the risk score only works on the last 5 years. Well, here's another feature. This is the Street View. So this is Google Maps Street View built into the system, where you can actually go and physically look. Oops, that guy was quite rude, that car. You can go and physically look at the outside of that factory and peek through the fence or whatever to see what kind of company it is. And you'd be surprised what you find when you do that. A couple of other things. You can also look up companies on Open Corporates, which will give you a lot of information about their financials, whether they've been prosecuted for things as well. So we plan to use that in future. You also get a direct link if they've got an FDA registration through to the FDA dashboard, and you can see everything about that particular supplier. You know, it takes a moment to come up sometimes there, but that's on the FDA website. So you can see these guys had a warning letter. They've been inspected left, right, and center. They've had lots of problems, and that's why they're in our demo database. So there's a whole bunch of interesting information you can get from all of that. And that's the contacts. Here's some of the regulatory issues that these guys had to deal with, and so on. What we're also doing at the back of all of this is we're actually analysing all of the food safety alerts that come through in terms of their categories and their hazards and so on. So what we're looking at here is a view of all of the food alert data that we've analysed using artificial intelligence. And for example, we can select all categories of products, and this is all of the data in the system. So you can see in terms of the kind of products that cause the most problems, snack other, meat products, and so on down here. And then up here, you can get the breakdown of all of this. And then this is the master category. So we've got a 3-level structure: master category, and then subcategory, food category, and then subcategory. And so this allows us to really drill down into particular sectors, particular food categories, and so on. So if that's bakery, then we can see the total food alert count for the master category bakery is here. And if we wanted to drill down a bit more into that, let's just pick one at random here, say baking mixes. We can see a whole bunch of things down here. Now, you'll notice that these are links straight to the original alerts. So there is ADM, for example, cinnamon roll mix, pieces of metal. We can drill right out to that. That'll take us out to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and we can find out what went on there. The actual food alerts are all here. These two graphs tell us something quite interesting, because this is the count of food alerts for that category structure across time. But what this is what we call the Anomaly Score. So we've done some proprietary analysis, which I can't really tell you about the calculation of that at the moment because that's confidential right now. But we've done some clever maths in the background and some clever algorithm stuff. And what we've worked out is how to spot things which are out of the ordinary. So everyone talks about horizon scan. What this is doing is it's really drilling into things that really shouldn't be happening. So if you look here and you compare the anomaly score with the actual count of food alerts, you can see there's a difference. And there's a big anomaly score here, and yet the number of food alerts was pretty low there. So we're still working this stuff through at the moment, but this will be appearing in AI Scan very, very soon. And you can see it's already all linked up to the data. And what we're going to be able to do is to drill into this and find out specifically what things that were happening here that were unusual, that were new, or that hadn't happened in a while, that kind of approach. But there's more to it than that. The anomaly algorithm that we built is a bit cleverer than that as well. So it should be pointing up, I'm still validating this, but it should be pointing out things that you really ought to be paying attention to. What our plan is to link these categories here with the categories of food products that we are buying from our suppliers, and then to be able to tell you about not only the food alerts, but the anomalies within those food alerts that you really ought to pay attention to. So that should really automate the process of the kind of horizon scanning activities that need to be done. So this is based on category. This other report here, this dashboard here, is based on hazards. So in this particular one, we're looking at master type of micro hazards, and then within that we've gone down the microbe route rather than parasite or virus, and then we have then looked at a specific organism, Salmonella, right? And that then again has got an anomaly score, and you can see there are 3 out of the ordinary, but particularly in 2015 there is a set of anomalies happening here that we need to know a bit more information about, whereas over here you would not be able to detect that there's something different in 2015 compared to, say, 2016 and so on. So this is the kind of work that we're doing that we feel is going to be of use to the industry, because let's face it, no one has time to do this kind of research on both suppliers and on the food safety hazards. And AI Scan is much more than just a supplier surveillance system. The real beauty of this is that in one go, we've analysed not only the suppliers, but all of the hazards, mapped them to food categories, mapped them to your suppliers, so that you really do have some pretty in-depth intelligence that's reaching into your supply chain and finding information. Now, it's not going to find everything, but as we grow this service and add on more data streams, it'll find more and more. And this information will be useful to help ensure that you keep your company out of the headlines and you improve the quality and performance of your supply chain and so on. So with that, I'd like to wrap up, and we'll hand back to Chris to moderate the questions and answers.
Perfect. Thanks, James. Really nice demo there. I think a really nice overview of the tool, and certainly touching on a few of the benefits there that the tool definitely brings. There's some questions coming, just 3 so far, but guys, if you do think of any more, feel free to pop them in now and we can get some answers. I think probably the one to start on is the most recent one that came in there from Judith, just while we're kind of touching on the suppliers within AI Scan. Judith's asking, what happens if my supplier is not in the AI global database?
Yeah, that's a great question. So your supplier, let me tell you why your supplier will be in the global database. So your supplier will be in the global database if they've ever been pinged on any of the data sources that we are looking for. So at the moment it's those 6, but we've identified about 120 worldwide that we can get access to data for. So that's the first thing. They're going to be there if they've ever been pinged since 2012 by any of the major food authorities that are out there, regulators. Second point is that if any of our customers, 3i Verify customers or suppliers of those customers are in 3i Verify, then they will also be in the global database, because everything, that information has to be synchronized through so you can get the data back, right? So if one company is using Barry Callebaut and another company is using Barry Callebaut, then the information about Barry Callebaut comes from the global database to both of those companies. So that's already thousands of suppliers, thousands upon thousands of suppliers in our customer database, plus tens of thousands of suppliers from outside of that. In fact, we've already got, I think, about 130,000 or maybe more food companies and importers and so on, people involved in food who are already in our database. If they don't exist, then the act of you adding a supplier into the system will make them exist. And they will then be in the system, and that supplier could then be added by someone else into their system. But it's not your record that goes in there. It's simply the name and address of the supplier. And if they're using that supplier, they can search for them and add them into the system. So what we're doing is maintaining a central database of what we call global companies. And those global companies are then associated with data that we gather about those global companies. But what we do not do is we do not share your information about those companies with any external party other than certification records, because that's important. So certification records, that, for example, you get a certificate in, say a BRC certificate, you get the date and time of that, the expiry date and so on, you update that. We will keep that information against the supplier so that other people can view the certification record of that. And that's a good thing because it saves people time. But we do not share the information about who shared it or anything else about the supplier. I hope that answers your question.
Perfect. And Judith just came in with a little follow-up question asking how often is the database updated? So if something happened today, reported today, how quickly will the database pick up on that?
Okay, at the moment, the data is updated with new data from these data sources at, I think it's 1 o'clock in the morning every night. In future, we might do that more frequently, but right now, most of these food alert sites, they're updated, I would say, sporadically. Some of them are updated every couple of days. Some of them might be on a batch basis every few weeks or whatever. So we are kind of looking into the past to a certain extent. But I think it was what we're likely to see in the next couple of years is that cycle will accelerate and information will be shared more rapidly as the food supply chain goes more digital. And therefore, we're likely to get much more near real-time information going forward. And as I say, we're looking to add in other data sources as well.
Perfect. Okay, Judith, hopefully that answers 2 of your questions there. So if you do have anything else, just let us know. Another question came in from RXC there, just asking, is the future plans to include non-English information as suppliers can be from worldwide?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have to start somewhere, and what we decided to do was to focus on English language alerts and trusted information at this point, clearly because one, we're based in the UK, and UK and US is our main market in terms of what we're looking at. However, we do recognise that English is not the most spoken language in the world. It's I think it's Chinese, isn't it? So and as the sort of Asia and Eastern economies definitely are coming much more to the fore, and not only in the last decade, but I think in the next 10 years you're going to see even more strong economic ties between those countries and the West in terms of food production and so on. So yeah, the short answer, we will be looking at other languages. We won't be doing it this year, but we'll probably be doing that into next year.
Perfect. Esther, I've not forgotten about you. We will come to your question, but Glenn's just come in with one that I think kind of fits a little bit more as to what we've just been talking about there. So he's saying, can you search for issues with type of raw material? For example, Food Health Brazil not contaminated with salmonella, may not have been from a supplier that you use, but would raise the risk of this material from the suppliers, and would all that information be captured and flagged?
Yeah, I mean, again, the information right now at this point, we are, I would say, we're relatively early in what we've done. Although what we've done, I think, is amazing considering where this started. But ultimately, what we will do is we will dig more and more deeply into the kind of supply chain of supply chains as that information becomes available. So I'll give you an example. So right now, most data about food supply chains are private to the individual company. So a particular food business knows who its supply chain is. Maybe the retailer of that, retailer customer of that company knows who the supply chain is, but very few other people do. And if you look at the Food Standards Agency website, you'll quite commonly see things like, in fact, here it's here, you'll quite commonly see things like, so there's an individual company, Rebecca Cakes there, but Lidl GB recalls sweetener, da-da-da. You simply cannot tell who the manufacturer is in some cases of these alerts because it's under a retail brand and they don't disclose who their manufacturer is going to be. So short answer to all of that is as we evolve with this, we will be looking to take advantage of more digital information that's out there, like in the USA, for example. They're really pushing for blockchain traceability, digital ledger traceability across the whole supply chain. And I think the next 5-10 years, that's what you're going to see. And so what we're trying to do is to join the dots in the background using all of this information and bring that to all of our customers.
Good. Perfect. Esther, I'll put you out of your misery and we will answer your question and put you off a couple of times. So Esther's asking about the European RASSF in terms of data sources for alerts.
Yeah, RASSF, yep. Everyone knows about RASSF, the Rapid Alert, blah, blah, blah. Can't even remember what the SS, there's me saying everyone knows of it and I can't tell you what it is, but you know what we mean. Right, so RASSF is a wealth of data, but it tends not to identify suppliers, which is the focus of our project initially here. So in terms of our sort of phase one, if you like, our phase one is to focus on suppliers because we think that's where most of the value actually lies. And that's what we've done. And that's why we created AI Scan. But the second phase of what we're doing with this is around what I just showed you, the anomaly detection side of things. This part is all focused on our existing data set, which is the same data set that AI Scan uses. And we will be adding RASSF data to this. So it's on the radar, and I would expect that probably by the end of this year, all of the RASSF data will be in here as well. It is publicly available. We can access it. We've chosen not to up until this point because we've chosen to focus on data that can be linked to suppliers. Okay.
Perfect. And it's the Rapid Alert System for Food and Feed.
There you go. Well done, Chris. I knew you would find out.
Good. A couple more questions then, James, and then we can move on to the introductory offer and just kind of wrap us up there. But Shane's asking, will the system be considering direct ingredients only, or will, for example, packaging and materials and other components be considered within the tool as well?
Yeah, a great question. So ultimately, what this is about is where we can get data sources. So if you can, what we've done with this, our technology here, is we have built machine learning algorithms that can go look at a data source, that can be trained to identify the company, identify what went wrong, identify the country of origin, identify a whole bunch of different things, and then put that data in a structured way that allows us to do analysis, alerts, and various other activities on it. So if there are recall databases with data that are available to us or that we can get access to, then the answer is yes, we can pretty much do anything. We're only looking at 6 data sources we know at the moment of a minimum of 128, and I suspect there's probably hundreds, but we've got to start somewhere, and this is where we started. So more data adds more value, and yes, we're definitely going to be looking at other sources, including for packaging.
Perfect. Okay, good. And the final question that we have here is asking about his company processes blueberries. We have around 100 farmers who provide the blueberries every year. Can this software be modified for tracking the farmers or the GFSI certificates, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So the farmers themselves, depending on where you are. So for example, in the UK, you have Red Tractor as the big assurance scheme. Outside the UK, you've got Global Gap as the big farmer assurance scheme. Nearly all of that data is available, and their certification is available. For example, in the US, Primus GFS data is available. Worldwide, Global Gap accreditation information is available electronically through an API. So short answer, absolutely. And this is something that we can probably implement very, very quickly based on what we've learned already.
Perfect. Okay, good stuff. That concludes the Q&A part of the webinar. There's just one final part to touch on. And James, if you could just bring up the presentation where we were talking there about the introductory offer for AI Scan, and we'll introduce that, and then we'll just wrap it up.
Okay.
So for anyone who is familiar with Primority and 3i Verify, you will know that the solution that we offer is tailored specific for each individual or each business, and it doesn't necessarily come as one set tool that you can add things, take things away as you need them. And the theme is going to continue there with AI Scan. So the monthly subscription cost is, there's 2 parts to that. So there's, as you can see at the top there, a £200 per month AI Scan bundle, which includes 1 AI admin and 2 AI standard users. I'll touch on them in a moment. And separately, if you wanted to just have 1 AI admin user or 1 standard user, or so on and so forth, or add more to that bundle, then there's a set price for that as well. The difference between an AI admin and an AI standard user is your AI admin user is going to be the person who has control of the admin functionalities within AI Scan, which James showed in the demonstration there. So that's going to be using the risk model, making any amendments to that, and the general functionality of an admin user. And your standard user is going to get everything else. So you're going to be able to see the profiles, corrective actions, so on and so forth. For existing customers throughout October, we are going to give all of our existing customers a free bundle. So that's 1 admin user and 2 AI standard users to get them familiar with the tool, understand the tool, use it, understand if it's working for them, so on and so forth. And should they wish to sign up in October, there'll be a 15% discount for the first year. And that is the same offer that we are putting on the table for any new customers who come on board with us throughout October, a 15% discount for the AI Scan module throughout the first year. That is pretty straightforward in terms of the pricing. If you do have any questions or you want to know any more, then obviously we can take that offline, and I'll be happy to help you with that. But I think that kind of concludes us really for this afternoon. I want to thank everybody for joining. It's been great, wonderful, some great questions in there as well. And hopefully you've got some benefit out of this afternoon, and I'll just pass you over to James for any closing comments.
Thanks very much for that, Chris. Yeah, I'd like to add my thanks to everyone who's turned up today. We had, I think at its peak, about 37 people here, so I'm delighted with that. And 32 of you have stayed on until the end. So thanks very much for that. A couple more points to make. is that AI Scan is an excellent tool if you're a US importer as well, because it has got access to all of the FDA data, but not only FDA data, all the other data sources that you saw as well. So for the Foreign Supplier Verification Program, for example, it's an excellent tool to conduct supplier monitoring with, as is the law there as well. But ultimately, we would want the people to use the system, provide us with feedback. We are constantly trying to improve the solution, and we really appreciate the feedback of our customers in that. And I personally spend a lot of my time talking to customers so that we can do that. So if you want to know more and you would like to get the system up and running for you, then please contact myself or Chris, and Chris is ch@primority.com. I am jf@primority.com, and we can take things from there. So thank you very much, and we will be posting a recording of the whole webinar in due course in the next day or two. Thank you.